point number 3. Time has tarried over 100 years beyond the time when the Lord clearly wanted to take His people home. During the lifetime of those who had personally experienced the revivals of the 1840s, they knew well our foundations, the landmarks of Adventism. And now they were all gone, including the prophetic voice. And we're looking for reasons for such a painful and embarrassing delay. Since the basis for the movement's foundation is in the book of Daniel and Revelation, we have gone back to these books to find some explanation for the delay. Some believe that we have been using a wrong method of interpretation, that a better method will will enable us to prepare the way for Christ's return. One writer quotes Christ's Object Lessons 127. In every age there is a new development of truth, and he refers to special light for God's people as they near the closing scenes. And it has become popular to advocate a dual application of prophecy in Daniel and Revelation, since Matthew 24 gives a clear example of dual fulfillment to Jerusalem and the end of the world in that chapter, with a suggestion that the day-for-year principle works up to 1844, but the day-for-day principle works after 1844. Some have suggested, since the historical approach has failed to produce the latter rain, we need a new method of interpreting prophecy. Once again, there's a truth at the bottom of these attempts to reinterpret prophecy. History will be repeated at the end of time. The events of the Middle Ages, which took centuries to develop, will be compressed into a short period at the end of time. Some chapters in the book in Daniel and Revelation have not received inspired illumination through the spirit of prophecy to know how to interpret them. And so we have done our best to understand, for instance, the seals and the trumpets without much inspired help. And perhaps we have not plumbed the depths yet of their fulfillment. My concern, though, is with those prophecies of Daniel and Revelation which have had clear fulfillments in history and are now being given second, more important applications in the future, reapplying the day-year principle to the day-day time in the future. Now let's go back to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 2, and let's just follow some examples through here of what is happening as God reveals these prophecies to Daniel. Daniel chapter 2, verse 36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Okay, so let's follow that kind of principle across the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 7, verses 15 and 16. And I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. Verse 28. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me. So Daniel was confused. He was asking for help, and the Lord gave him that help. In chapter 8, verses 15 and 16, I, Daniel, needed this help, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of these things. That's Daniel 7, verses 15 and 16. Now Daniel 8, verses 15 and 16. And it came to pass, when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Uli, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. And then over in chapter 9, verse 23, at the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved, therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. So notice carefully the pattern. It's consistent. God gave both the vision and the interpretation to Daniel, so there could be no misunderstanding. Nowhere in Daniel or Revelation is there a hint that this was only a preliminary fulfillment, with the real fulfillment to come in the end time. Nowhere in the many visions given to Ellen White did she suggest a dual fulfillment. There is nothing about Iraq and Iran and the U.S. and Russia as the real fulfillments of these beasts. There are no such indications as this. There's an important principle here, that dual fulfillment, if it really is a dual fulfillment, it needs later inspired corroboration to be sure. And that word inspired corroboration is important. It's important to note here that the loud cry could have begun shortly after 1888, if the message of Christ's righteousness had been accepted. And Ellen White, during these years, says nothing about needing or accepting a new method of interpreting Daniel and Revelations. But she has many endorsements of Uriah Smith's book as containing light and truth. Now, that doesn't mean that every detail is right. It does mean a sound method was used. The fact that history will be repeated does not mean that prophetic terms will be repeated. The time prophecies that are most often applied to the future are the 1260 and the 1290 and the 1335. For instance, it is said that in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 3 and 5, let's read it. Chapter 13, verses 3 and 5, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So in verse 5, there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. It is said that this proves that the 1260 days, the 42 months, must start after the deadly wound is healed, which we assume was finished in 1929, but really it is still not yet fully healed. That was the beginning of the healing of the wound. This idea is based on the false assumption that Revelation 13 is in chronological order. Notice what happens here. In verse 11 it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So that would be interpreted as the second beast, the United States, would arise after the deadly wound was healed. And that can't possibly be true. After the 1260 days. So that's a clear contradiction of what the prophecy is and Ellen White's understanding of these issues. Ellen White said it this way: our position has been one of waiting and watching, with no time proclamation to intervene between the close of the prophetic periods in 1844 and the time of our Lord's coming. Manuscript Releases, Volume 10, 269 and 270. So the prophetic periods closed in 1844, and we have no more time proclamation. One Adventist futurist says, the historical approach has served us well in the past, but like the horse and buggy, no longer fits our needs. It is like the horse and buggy, no longer relevant. So thus these books, Daniel and Revelation, which Ellen White told the book Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith, Ellen White told our young men to do all they could to sell this book, and which should be studied carefully by the students in our schools. That book is no longer relevant to our superior wisdom. It's horse and buggy, and we need something better. Now, just a word about the 1290 and the 1335 of Daniel 12. Here is a particular individual who was talking about these things, and Ellen White told him, we told him of some of his errors in the past, that the 1335 days were ended, and numerous errors of his. That was written in 1850. You can find it in Manuscript Releases, Volume 5, page 203. So here's the question. Is one of his errors that the 1335 days had ended, or did Ellen White tell him that the 1335 had ended? Which way was it? Was it an error, or was it the truth? The key to unlock this grammatical question is the word we. We told him. James and Ellen told him. So what did James believe? Well, he's clear. The evidences are conclusive that the 1335 days ended with the 2300 with the midnight cry of 1844. Review and Herald, January 29, 1857. So there's no way that James would have said that it was an error to believe that the 1335 days had ended. He believed they had ended. In Daniel 12, there are several key words. Key words are daily, taken away, abomination, desolate, set up. In Daniel 11:31 are the same key words, take away, daily, place, which is the same as set up, abomination, desolate. And Daniel 11:32 to 35 describes the papal reign of 538 to 1798, not the future. The linguistic evidence is that the 1290 in Daniel 12 describes the same time period, not a new time period to take place in the future. Ellen White again, the people will not have another message based on definite time. After this period of time, reaching from 1842 to 1844, there can be no definite tracing of the prophetic time. The longest reckoning reaches to the autumn of 1844. Bible Commentary, Volume 7, page 971. So prophetic time does not mean just year for day time, but definite time, prophetic time with a starting and ending point. And she says, no more will that happen. There's one interesting time that happened in Ellen White's time in which she wrote to an individual by the name of John Bell. John Bell, this was November 8, 1896. And she is writing to him with these words. I have not been able to sleep since 1:30 o'clock. I was bearing to Brother John Bell a message which the Lord had given me for him. The peculiar views he holds are a mixture of truth and error. There are those now living who, in studying the prophecies of Daniel and John, receive great light from God. The truth shone out clearly as the sun at noonday. Historical events showing the direct fulfillment of prophecy were set before the people, and the prophecy was seen to be a figurative delineation of events leading down to the close of this earth's history. Those who in their experience have passed over the ground and acted a part in the proclamation of the first, second, and third angels' messages are not so liable to be led into false paths as are those who have not had an experimental knowledge of the people of God. There have been one and another who, in studying their Bibles, thought they discovered great light and new theories, but these have not been correct. Some will take the truth applicable to their time and place it in the future. Events in the train of prophecy that had their fulfillment away in the past are made future. You see, John Bell was placing the three angels' messages in the future, not just in the past in 1844, but also into the future. She continued, from the light that the Lord has been pleased to give me, you are in danger of doing the same work, presenting before others truths which have had their place and done their specific work for the time in the history of the faith of the people of God. You recognize these facts in Bible history as true, but apply them to the future. In other words, they happened in the past, but they are now going to happen again in the future. They have their force still in their proper place in the chain of events that have made us as a people what we are today, and as such, they are to be presented to those who are in the darkness of error. You and other of our brethren must accept the truth as God has given it to his students of prophecy. From their voices and pens, the truth in bright, warm rays has gone to all the world, and that which was to them testing truth is testing truth to all to whom this message is proclaimed. That which was truth then is truth today. But those who have set themselves to study out new theories have a mixture of truth and error combined. According to the light God has given me, you are on the same track. That which appears to you to be a chain of truth is, in some lines, misplacing the prophecies and counterworking that which God has revealed as truth. So that was her warning to an individual who was taking prophecies, reapplying them into the future, which had a fulfillment in the past. An interesting postscript to this is by A.G. Daniels, who said, John Bell has taken a splendid position on the testimony concerning his book. He has set aside his erroneous views altogether and stands in the best position I have known him at all. That's a nice way of concluding this letter that Ellen White wrote, warning him of his danger, and he accepted that warning. Well, the results of these reinterpretations of the books of Daniel and Revelation, there's much speculation. There are hardly two interpreters that are agreed about the meaning of the symbols. They focus on events and dates and popes rather than heart-searching and receiving the latter rain. And it is a subtle form of time setting for Christ's return. How does that work? If the clocks, the new clocks, the day-for-day clocks, begin with the Sunday laws, as most of them do, and they end with the special resurrection, which is shortly before the second coming, then when the Sunday law occurs, we will know the approximate time of Christ's return. In an early vision, Ellen White saw, after the day and hour was announced, that Jesus left the sanctuary for the earth, which would take a number of days. That was Day Star, March 14, 1846. So when Jesus comes back to this earth, it is right after the day and the hour are announced in this special proclamation. So that means that we will know at the giving of the Sunday law when Jesus is going to come back within just a few days. And that is time setting.